Hello, welcome to another episode of the Option Plus podcast. This is also a recording of my talk. This one is actually a little bit older talk. It's from 2020. And I talk about COVID a little bit, but not in any particular detail. So don't worry if you think and if you're fed up with this topic. I only mentioned it in relationship with the main topic of this talk, which is uncertainty, volatility, optionality, and freedom. The reason I'm telling you that it's from 2020 is that when I talk about the level of the level of uncertainty, you need to understand that it was from 2020, and the uncertainty perhaps went down at least a little bit, especially about this topic. But I still think we live in a volatile and quite uncertain time period. So I think this talk is very useful, and it contains a few strategies and few ways how to think about these topics and how do they relate to each other. So I hope you enjoy this talk and this podcast episode, and it is from really good conference called Hackers Congress Parallel Polis, which happens every year at the end of September, beginning of October in Parallel Polis in Prague. So I hope to see you there this year. Enjoy.
So what a boring year, right? And I'm saying that because when you are in an environment of uncertainty, it's quite easy to make decisions. My decision was to focus on thinking about uncertainty and optionality. So I couldn't travel, I couldn't see my friends for most of the year. I spent a lot of time at home, and because of uncertainty, it was quite boring. I'm not saying that the year was not eventful, but my reaction was that I basically decided to play it safe. And the reason I would like to explore how to make use of uncertainty and how to think in this environment of uncertainty. So this is the first part. So many people during the COVID crisis, they were fortune telling from graphs and numbers with the idea that when there is an environment of uncertainty, we would like to make some sense of it and try to gather as much data and see what's going on. So for me, for example, in the case of COVID, but that's not the only uncertain thing in this environment, is that for me, the number of cases and number of deaths were not as much interesting numbers because I think the more important question is what it is that we do not know. So there's a lot of noise in the data and so on. But for example, for me, the answer, the main question that I wanted an answer to is what are the long-term consequences if you're getting infected? Is it something that stays in your body for a long time? Is it something that just goes away, or it's just the flu? And this is something that the numbers will not tell you yet because it's a pretty young thing. So I'm not playing an expert on the internet. I don't have to be right about it. What I just want to understand is the structure of uncertainty. So is it something that can hurt me? Is it something that can help me? And the way to make this choice is quite simple. actually. The good heuristic that I heard from Nassim Nicholas Taleb is choose the option that you would regret the least in all circumstances. So you cannot predict the future. You don't know what the future holds, what is going to happen. But given all the possibilities and given the uncertainty, what is the least regrettable decision? What is interesting, if you think like this, the more uncertain the environment, the easier the decision. And it is because the uncertainty goes in two ways, upside and downside. So, for example, Bitcoin has a very nice uncertainty. It can go down only to zero, but it can go up to any arbitrary number. So this is the good type of uncertainty. So the decision that I would regret the least is buy Bitcoin as soon as possible, because when it's on the moon, it's too late. If the decision is about something that can hurt me long term, again, very easy decision. If there is a time when to stay home and meet physically a little bit less, it's probably now, and I can deal with it, and I'm sure that I will not regret it, even if it turns out that it was not a problem at all. I'm creative. As Pavel said, I wrote a book. I created a few courses. I'm working. I'm enjoying my life. But I'm not risking. So uncertainty relates to risk. And I think the risk is the main difference between employees and entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs have to work with risk a little bit more, so they understand it a little bit better. And we will also talk about volatility. So volatility also relates to risk and uncertainty in a nice way. So first of all, what is the relationship between uncertainty and or volatility in this case and the outcome? So if in the case of higher uncertainty higher volatility, if we are gaining, we are in the anti-fragile domain. And if the stressor, volatility, and so on, mistakes, randomness increases and we lose, we are in a fragile situation. So in an uncertain situation, we can think, okay, we don't know what is going to happen, but just in case, when this volatility or these stressors increase, what is going to happen? Is it going to be good or bad? And if you find yourself in the green line, you can risk, you can make use of the uncertainty. And if you're in the red line, then it's good to avoid or find a way how to turn it upside down. So there are many strategies how to make use of volatility. One of them is called barbell strategy. I've been in my talk in a few HCPPs ago, I was talking about the barbell strategy, so you can find it in Nassim Nicholas Taleb's books. But today I want to show you another strategy, which is called optionality. And optionality relates in a way to options in financial markets. So that's the inspiration. But I apply it in everyday life. What is interesting about optionality? First of all, what it is. Option is something that I may, but I don't have to exercise. So, for example, in financial markets, a call option is a possibility of or an option to buy a certain asset at a certain price at the time of expiration in case of European options. So this is the main structure. I may, but I don't have to exercise this option. And in order to do it, you should first acquire the option. So it's not something that you can do anytime, and the relationship is because of volatility. So some work or investment in advance is required, and then exercising or using the option should be relatively cheap. So so as I said, a call option is a right to buy underlying at a certain price at the time of maturity. Put option is a right to sell at a certain price at the time of maturity. And the relationship between price of an option and volatility is mathematical. So of course, options on financial markets are actually based on supply and demand, but the relationship between price and something called implied volatility is mathematical. So when you see a price of an option, of an asset, you know its price and you know the maturity, the expiration, you can actually see what the market thinks the volatility is. So a price of an option, among other things, shows the expectation of the market about volatility. And basically the relationship is that the higher the volatility, the higher the price of the option. So just to see it on the graph, and then I will probably switch off the slides because you see it in reverse. But this is call option premium for different values of implied volatility. So so you can see that, for example, the red one, the second from the bottom, is volatility of 25%. That's the volatility that the market expects. And on the horizontal line, you can see the strike prices. So what is the price of the call option, or what is the price at which I can buy the underlying? So what is the strike price of the option? And on the y-axis, on the vertical axis, you can see the call option price in dollars. So the more market expects volatility, the higher the price of the option. If the market gets it wrong, if the volatility increases, you can actually make money on the option, and we can see how you can do it also in normal life. Let's switch here. So optionality applied in life, not on financial markets. A good thing would be an option to buy a respirator in January, or an option to use a respirator. In January, this option would be very cheap. You would just go to a store where they sell medical equipment. You say, okay, I want to buy 30 FFP3 respirators. You would pay whatever, €5 per respirator. You go home and you're happy. In May, not so much. So an option to use the respirator because of the increased volatility, increased demand, was much more expensive. People were selling a single respirator for 20 or even more euros. It kind of went to the black market because certain states actually banned sale of respirators. So an option to use it, if you wanted to acquire this option by buying the physical respirator in January, you could sell it for 4 or 5 times the price in May. So this is how optionality works, and I will give a little bit more examples. How does it relate with freedom and digital totality? So what central authorities and states do, what they try to do is they try to stabilize the environment. When you ask a statist about what is the role of the state, is that they need to provide security, justice, they need to enforce contracts, they need to protect us from outside attacks, and so on. All these roles of the state are roles to stabilize the environment. So that's the goal of the state. So anything volatile, any big moves is something that people don't like. They're not used to it, and the state tries. The state tries to kind of calm people down by stabilizing the environment. Having an option means that you don't want to bet on the state to make stability happen. Of course, there are many other sources of stability or instability that I will talk about. In decentralized, free, high optionality environment, it thrives, learns, and improves because of anti-fragility on volatility. So actually, up to a point, of course, but the more volatility there is, the better the discovery of the best solutions on decentralized markets, the more value of having options to choose from. So the more value from optionality you get. So this is, I think, very interesting property, and it is mathematical. Again, it's not just philosophical or something. It is mathematical from how the options actually work. Of course, increasing your freedom by acquiring options is not not so straightforward, because you don't want to buy all options. You don't want to buy respirators and antibiotics and spaceships and 7 houses and yacht and everything, because you might need it in the future. So how to actually be capitally efficient and acquire the options that you need. So in order to make use of anti-fragility, especially in this hard to predict domain, it is very difficult to say, okay, there's going to be a pandemic, tomorrow there might be a crisis, then there might be floods or whatever, climate change, disaster, anything that can happen. So my suggestion is not to look at what the events are, but what are your actual needs, what is valuable for you. So most people actually, when you look at the Maslow pyramid, most people need shelter, food, and so on. But there are some personal things that you might need. So for example, for me, my living is entirely dependent on electricity and internet. So I might increase my options in having good electricity, stable electricity supply, and good internet connection. So that's an option I would invest in. A farmer who's growing their own food might not need electricity, and so on. So for many people, the ability to generate wealth or income is important to them. So this is something that they might, for example, invest their time in. About freedom, I think there are several types of freedom, and I'm talking about optionality, but it's worth mentioning that it's not the only way to look at freedom. So I perceive one of the definitions is freedom from. That means I don't have anyone telling me what to do. So no boss, no state, no government, and so on. Doesn't mean that I'm going to do bad things. It just means that I am free from coercion, from commands from someone else. Another type of option is freedom 2. This is positive freedom. And this kind of freedom, it's not a positive right, but it's basically productivity. So if I have all the time in the world, no one is commanding me, I can do whatever I want, what I'm going to do. So for me, for example, I had nothing to do, so I decided to write a book about uncertainty, which is first in Slovak. It's being produced right now, printed, and so on. There will also be an English version, hopefully quite soon. But this is freedom 2. This is when you have empty space, no commands, no one telling you what to do. What are you going to create? And I think that a lot of freedom people get too philosophical. They talk about non-aggression principles and how the utopian world that they imagine should work, and then they're said that the utopian world is not here yet, and they live in a statist dystopia. But I think more productive and much more fulfilling thing is using freedom 2. An option is collecting these things that you might but don't have to do. So increasing your optionality affects your freedom. It is not always universally a good thing. So first I said that acquiring an option costs capital or time. So these options are not free. You need to choose carefully which options you actually want, and it's not universal. It's not a, let's acquire a societal option for everyone. These are highly personal things. There's also analysis paralysis. So if you have too many options, then you don't know which one to choose. So for a good trick for this, if you are ever paralyzed by making a decision, is using heuristics, but a good trick is to make the decision in advance. So for example, if you know that when you are tired, you go to a restaurant and you order some junk food, because you are paralyzed by so many options. If you decide what you're getting before going to the restaurant, when you have energy, it's a trick to kind of hijack this analysis paralysis. So let's talk about some options. One of the really good options that we should all think about is Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin? Why I say it's an option? There are options on Bitcoin, but I'm talking about Bitcoin as an option. I think Bitcoin is a hedge or insurance against failing of the financial system. So the thing about options, again, when volatility increases, the price goes up. So so if Bitcoin is a hedge against the failure of the main financial system, it is too late to buy insurance when your roof is already on fire. You need to do it way before. So if you perceive Bitcoin the same as me, as a hedge against failing financial system, hedge meaning insurance, option can also be thought of as insurance. You should buy it when it's cheap. So the strategy, okay, when there's a problem with euro, I will then buy Bitcoin, but I don't need it right now. No, you buy insurance when you don't need it, because it's cheap when you don't need it, and when people don't think that you're actually going to need it. We are used to these just-in-time structures. So when you need to buy a new laptop, you click on Amazon, or you go to a store and you buy it, and probably it was manufactured a few weeks before. All the parts were manufactured a few weeks before, and it's kind of completed, and it's basically following the demand. So the supply is kind of just reacting on the demand, which is very efficient, very optimal, unless you are talking about options. Because when you do this with optionality, you are overpaying. So options take time to build. You can also perceive your freedom of relationships, your job, as something that can increase in optionality. So, for example, a lot of us didn't have an option to work from home, and they were quite suffering because they were not used to it. They were in jobs where this was maybe not even possible. So it is not that the option just magically appears. So it's the same thing with Bitcoin. The underlying situation, so for example, the failing of the financial system might not happen. So we might even wish it does not happen. We don't want our roof to actually burn down when we buy insurance. We just want to be covered in case this happens. So I think it might be good to think about optionality also as insurance and buying it in advance. Another thing that does really well in volatility are parallel systems. So welcome to Parallelnipolis, which is one example of parallel society. There are many parallel solutions in education. People suddenly, during COVID times, realized that they can use a system which is better in this situation, which was remote learning, online courses, and so on. So people who are used to this actually started using these things and way before COVID, so they were used to it and they were not so surprised, and they even thrived. A lot of teachers realized, a lot of people who are doing, for example, courses, realized that they don't need to do things like, okay, I'll do a course in Prague and then the next week in Bratislava and the next week in Berlin or something like that. They could just do one course online for everyone, and it doesn't matter where they are, because they would not meet even if they were in the same city. So they realized, okay, this is an advantage of this new situation. So my question is, why were not people doing it before? Because they had some ideas about a workshop, should be in person, and, video conferencing is not there yet. A lot of people actually switched, and even a few companies, big companies, switched to VR, which is another thing. So many parallel solutions, and because there is no one parallel solution, but many parallel solutions, when the situation changes in the environment of high volatility, you can just pick the parallel solution that is best for the current situation, and so on. So if you are able to deal with volatility, for example, in Bitcoin, think about how you can use this skill in other areas of your life. Okay, when Bitcoin is volatile, I do this. When it's cheap, I do this. When it's expensive, why not think the same way about work? So if I'm sick or tired, I don't work. If I'm creative, I work, and it doesn't matter if it's Saturday or Tuesday or 3 p.m. or 6 a.m. I can choose based on the volatility of the environment, of my personal situation, and so on. So a few more examples of options. As I said, remote work, ability to work from home, it has to be acquired. It's too late to if you're actually in a job where you have a boss, it is too late to go to your boss and tell him that from tomorrow you want to try working from home. It is something that I, as an entrepreneur, was working on, and it took me some time until I was able to do it. I said that, for example, my income depends on electricity. So to increase my optionality, I bought a solar panel and a battery and everything. So I'm totally independent on the general supply and distribution of electricity. It's not because of the environment, although it's a nice side effect that I can brag and signal my environmental friendliness. It's not because I don't like electricity companies. I'm indifferent. They're providing me electricity, so I'm quite happy. I'm using their services. It's not because it's cheaper, because it's not cheaper. Economies of scale of nuclear power plant even outweighs the distribution losses. It's because in a situation with a market turmoil, so for example, if people plug in their subsidized electric cars to the network, it takes time to upgrade the network. And in the case something happens to electricity supply or distribution or making electricity, I can even make it and sell it. So it's an option that increases in value. So right now it's a very expensive electricity. I like to use it because I like the feeling of producing my own electricity, but I also use standard electricity from the distribution. But I have an option in case something happens to the electricity network to create my to make my own electricity and just continue with my job, with my work, and so on. So again, there is a cost. You need to acquire the means of production. The option is not free, but you get additional freedom from future market prices. So in case someone creates whatever energy tax because of carbon emissions, or actually there's a shortage of electricity on the market, I'm hedged against all these things. So let's tie this back to uncertainty. Uncertainty, you can be uncertain in volatile, but also in a non-volatile environment. So there is something that is called volatility of volatility. And it's about this fight between the centralized attempts to tame volatility, to stabilize everything. So the states try to, get the COVID numbers down, make the stock prices not volatile and go up, prevent the crash, whatever, save failing businesses and so on. So they're trying to do this. They're creating stability. But at some point, they reach this point of no return when it just explodes and there is huge volatility. And they try to tame it again and try to bring it back down and stabilize the environment. So these episodes of low volatility, of stability, are interchanged with high volatility, where the efforts to stabilize broke down. And if you have a high volatility of volatility, which means that there's the volatility is going up and down all the time. So stable, volatile, stable, volatile, stable, volatile. If this is happening, that usually predicts crises and market turmoil. So this is a very, very interesting thing to think about. So you can watch what is happening. If the environment is stable, perfect. Acquire options. They're cheap. You can think about what is important for you in your life, and when the volatility goes up, you can use these options. You can even sell them if sometimes, and so on. So I would like to finish with some positive message what to do, because the world is going to be more chaotic and volatile. I personally believe that. If not, nothing happens, but if it's the case, the central tendencies to stabilize or conserve the environment will inevitably fail. And it is good to increase our freedom and options now, not when everyone else tries to cope with this situation. That's too late. Building optionality infrastructure is a great strategy for increased volatility. So that's something that we can do. And I have three. It's not very exhaustive ideas of what people can do, but I have three things that I would like people to do. This T-shirt says Etický vexlák, which is the name of my course. It's an ethical crypto dealer. I think it is very important for crypto people to always be market makers. If someone wants to buy Bitcoin, sell it to them all the time. If someone wants to sell it to you, always buy it. There are strategies on how to hedge the risk so you don't lose money. And I like to teach people how to become human ATM machines, Bitcoin ATM machines. The reason why I think this is important is because the tendencies to stabilize financial system are entering through these regulations, AML5, FATF-Gafi, and many other ways. Chain analyses and these evil people who try to track the transactions. So I think it is very important that we people are building the infrastructure for getting into and out of parallel economy. So crypto dealers. Also, when you have this opportunity, become a decentralized market. So you don't have to be super sophisticated. Ask if someone will sell you meat or food from their farm, their produce, and become a parallel market participant. So always buy and sell crypto, but also for crypto. So, for example, what I was doing in March is that people wanted to get some supplements to strengthen their immune system. So I'm an IT guy, but I knew how to get these supplements. There was a shortage. So I order a bunch of stuff, zinc, glutathione, vitamin D, and all the other stuff, elderberry extracts and stuff like that. And I became a dealer of dealer of supplements. I was doing it for my friends for crypto, and I made a little bit of money on this because I found a way to do it cheaply. But this is creating the parallel structure. This is not going to create itself. It's an option that we need to all work on if we want to make use of it. And the third thing is societal structures, so parallel police, clubs, any societies, any crypto communities, farmers markets. Everything is more fun and more useful if you do it with like-minded people. So you can make use of division of labor, and you collectively can make use and thrive in this volatile environment much better. So ethical crypto dealers, building decentralized markets and societal structures. I think this is it from me.
If you are a regular listener of this podcast, or if you found value in this podcast, there is a really easy way to show your support and help us grow. Download any podcasting 2.0 app such as Fountain or Breeze. They work both on iOS and Android. And then follow the Option Plus podcast and start listening. You can share your thoughts on this episode by sending a boost that's like a payment with a message, and see what other listeners have to say or create clips of the best moments. Getting started is easy. You can top up your Fountain or Breeze wallet with a Bitcoin Lightning transaction or even a bank card. I hope this podcast brings value to you, and it would be great if you can support this podcast by paying us this value. You probably spent some time listening to it, so you already demonstrated it is not worthless. So it would be nice to reward the podcaster, in this case me, with what this podcast is worth to you. The alternative for podcasters such as me is advertising, and with podcasts that are created for the sake of advertising, you become the product and not the customer. I would personally like you to remain a customer, not a product, and I would like your support in allowing this podcast to continue in a sustainable way. Try it out. Thank you for listening.